People of Reddit, what's one mistake or decision you made that completely altered the course of your life? Went to meet my bio mom. 8 years later, a crippling disorder, brain damage, and some significant trauma later. Turns out there was a very good reason I was adopted. I got to meet my sisters though, and I'm the uncle to a whole herd of nieces and nephews. And I wouldn't trade that for the world. Makes the damage worth it, honestly. The way their faces light up when they see me and how loved I feel with them is something you can't ever replace. Did she hit you or something? Or did you just find out you had genetic brain issues? Drug addict who physically, mentally, and emotionally abused me, stalked me, tried to kill me when I tried to leave, and only stopped when a restraining order and 9mm were brought into the picture. I had a psychotic break from reality due to all of this. Spent about a year unable to, well, connect. Period. Mostly had to be drugged up so I wouldn't tear my own skin off. Turns out it's surprisingly easy to break a brain. Just throw in a few years of 24/7 abuse, gaslighting, and drug use, and then try to kill them when they leave. She's not a good person, and she did it to herself. So I have no sympathy. What she did to herself while on meth was bad enough. What she did to me, Jesus fucking Christ. Thank fuck I wasn't raised by her. Oh my god. Jeez. No way you could have predicted that. Sorry it turned out to be so horrible. I'm glad you got away from her, both times. My wonderful 2-year-old daughter was not planned, but thanks to her, I decided to have a vasectomy. I had always had one slightly enlarged testicle due to a mountain biking accident 10 years prior. My urologist had it biopsied because it didn't look right. Turns out I had had testicular cancer for an impossible to determine period of time. 4 rounds of chemo later and I'm perfectly fine. Had I not had my daughter, I would have probably had much worse results years later when it finally made its presence known via pain and had spread into my body. So my daughter technically saved my life, which is knowledge I'm sure she'll use on with great glee during her teenage years when I'm trying to punish her. Years ago I was heading to Hawaii in February and I was pasty white, so I decided to go to a tanning salon first to get base tan and not burnin' high. The bed was in a mirrored room and I noticed my left testicle was enlarged. Had surgery and radiation and I am fine. So getting a tan saved me from dying of cancer. Your story is more heartwarming. Good you noticed it. Base tan is a dangerous myth perpetuated by tanning salons, though. Nah dude, you're probably safe from that as I doubt many teenage girls will want to talk about their dad's balls. If anything, you have the upper hand on her. Got hamburger buns. Dad died, depressed, was without a job for over a year, applied at a few different places and heard nothing back. Went to a BBQ at a friend's house and stopped at the store first. We got everything we needed, went out to the car, started packing up and realized we forgot hamburger buns. I go back in the store. I'm walking down the frozen foods aisle and run into an old coworker, who happened to now be a manager at one of the places I applied at months ago. Chatted it up with him for a little bit, and 3 days later, I get a call out of the blue to come in for an interview at his company he worked at. I've been with the company 18 years. Last month, all because of the chance encounter in the frozen food aisle. All because I forgot hamburger buns. I read the first 2 sentences and thought, how did your dad die because you bought hamburger buns? I mean, survivor's guilt and similar stuff is definitely a thing. LOL. When I moved and switched middle schools way back, I threw out all my stuff except for my math textbook. When I went to my new school, the math class I was in was a little bit behind from where I was and I told them, but they didn't believe me. But then I showed my old math textbook to show that I was way ahead of that class. 2 of my classes were changed, and in both of my new classes were a bunch of friends I made. If I threw away that math textbook, I wouldn't have any good friends right now. They wouldn't let you test out, or was this in middle high school? This was middle school. I should have specified that. After my dad died when I was 21, I moved from Detroit to Portland for a change of scenery and to get out of the rut of drinking every night with my friends. This was mid-recession, so unemployment was like 14% in Portland. I got a job working 5 PM to 5 AM in a nightclub 3 nights per week and it sucked. Then I got laid off. I was lost. A college dropout. No money. No job and even the promise of a mild winter didn't happen. Portland got their worst snowstorm in 30 years. I found out a college buddy lived in Portland and we connected. We went out on a Tuesday night and we ate mushrooms. And in the moment of clarity that mushrooms give you as you are coming down, I realized how much I hated living in Portland. I texted one friend and said let's move to NYC and texted another and said let's move to Chicago. I woke up and they had both said no. I thought fuck it, I'll move to Chicago anyway. So I sold my car that Friday, bought a train ticket and was on a train Monday. Cut to 12 years later. I still live in Chicago. I went back to school and got my degree. I have a good job. I just celebrated my first wedding anniversary, albeit in quarantine rather than the Mexico trip we had scheduled. We have an awesome dog, and we're closing on a house next month. All of this because I took mushrooms and decided to move to Chicago. Are you telling me I should do drugs? I think you know the answer is yes. Remember that hallucinogens are transformative. You might be better, you might be worse, but you'll definitely be different. They gave me far-seeing eyes. I liked to CPS when I was 13. I finished growing up with my dad instead of being taken away. I knew what I was doing and looking back I wouldn't change it. I've met some wonderful people and I don't think I would have met them if I had told the truth that day. What happened with your dad? Why were they there? etc. If you mind answering, it's okay if you don't, I am just curious. My dad let me play physical sports so that way he could beat me and the bruises wouldn't be suspicious. Well, my coach noticed that the pattern of the bruises appearing didn't coincide with games scrimmage practice, so he called CPS. Overall, just a drunk old man abusing what power he had. I know I would have gone into the system, and that's one place I didn't want to be because I had met kids from foster homes and they always ended up moving away after about a year. I've worked through a lot of it with a therapist, but quite frankly I kind of don't want kids. I'm scared to resemble my dad in any way, shape or form. I am so sorry you had to go through this. Hopefully you, and possibly your dad, are all in better places now. 3. Said yes to going to the pub. I was on a backpacking trip around Europe. At a hostel in Belfast, this Australian guy who was in the same dorm as me asked if anyone wanted to join him for a drink. Me and a New Zealander tagged along. We had an absolutely epic night in what was then still a city under martial law. Next day we all went in different directions, but I kept in contact with the Australian. At some stage, months later, he mentioned that I should come and visit him in Australia. About 6 months later I did. I had a fantastic time. Traveled around Australia and liked it so much that I applied for a residency permit. 30 years later I'm still here. It's been absolutely great. But none of that would have happened if I didn't say yes to a few beers all the way back in the 80s. NGLU really had me in the first half. Most life-altering stories that are tagged by the phrase saying yes to going to the pub do not end on a positive note. I know, right? I got super nervous for the ending when he said yes to the pub. I was expecting a romantic ending. Smoked synthetic cannabis, mental breakdown, antipsychotics, complete change in my physique and personality. 2030 was a blur. I'm on very low doses of my meds with careful management from my shrink. But I know I will need them for the rest of my life. Lost so many years and experiences that I'll never get back. Stay the hell away from spice. K2, Black Mamba and the like if you value your mind. Not sure if I'm rude for asking or if even you're comfortable sharing. But what did you experience while under the influence of spice? Obviously whatever it was crushing for your psyche. Totally understand if you'd rather not relive it by describing it here. Hope you're doing well nowadays, buddy. Not OP. But spice was definitely the worst high I've ever experienced. I can recall one specific time where I smoked a bowl of flour before my buddy pulled out the sack of pineapple spice. I should have known it wasn't anything to mess with as soon as I smelt it, and it legit smelled like pineapples. I took one hit and before I could even look up I was gone. It was like a movie where the camera zooms back from the character on screen to represent the distortion they're feeling. It was almost exactly like that. Weed messes with your sense of time, but spice will completely uck with your sense of reality. I can't really recall how it occurred, but at some point I was laying on my friend's bed rocking back and forth saying this isn't real, and after my friends got me to calm down I started shoving fistfuls of fruity pebbles in my face. Not in my mouth. More like punching myself in the face and letting the cereal fall all around me. I went on absurd rants. I called my ex and just blurted our complete nonsense. I'd completely lost my sense of self. I woke up the next day with a blistering headache, and the spice supplier yelling at the other guys hanging out in the house for stealing the spice in the middle of the night and smoking the rest of it. Spice tolerance is exponential. Being that it was my first time, I couldn't take anything more than one hit, whereas my friends were chasing what I was feeling all night. My buddy who was supplying was buying ounces for $20, and at 16 years old we really thought it was gonna be some godsend we'd always needed. I smoked it maybe 3 or 4 more times, and while I don't have the lasting effects OP has, I've had persistent closed eye hallucinations when I'm completely sober ever since. I can cover my eyes and hallucinate almost on command. I'll never know if it was from the spice, but I bet it is. Sounds like HPPD. I have it too. It gives you visual snow, which is like a faint overlay of TV static on your vision. It also causes colors to have a rainbow border around them, especially colors that contrast with others a lot, like black. When I look at black I no longer see solid black, it's weird. In a dark room I'll see purple green kaleidoscope patterns moving on the walls and shit from when I tripped. nmwikipedia.org link. Not actually his fault, but my boyfriend basically had his life crumble in front of him when, a week before deployment from PT, his parachute malfunctioned, and he fell 2,000 feet with a malfunctioning parachute. He broke his ankle and messed up his back. His aunt, who he lived with, mentally abused him and got him to break up with me because she kept filling his head with the idea I wasn't right for him and he didn't deserve love. His aunt kicked him out because he didn't want to pay her $2,000 a month for rent anymore. So he was injured and homeless. Thankfully he managed to turn it around, and now he's a security guard at a local hospital and is completely self-sufficient. But his aunt, who volunteers there, keeps trying to get him fired.